Executing a plan of attack when natural disasters strike is imperatively important, particularly if you own a small to medium-sized business, because you have to protect both your financial, personal, and business future. And the unpredictability of the weather may cause you to take unprecedented but needed steps in order for you to protect your future. According to a report published in September of last year, it found that 61% of companies have raised their philanthropic giving in support of natural disasters. Despite increased spending in this area, fewer than half of all firms and businesses conduct regular exercise planning to prepare for natural disasters or routinely evaluate the impact of their efforts in this regard. Furthermore, only 28% of CEOs and company executives collaborate with their peers when it comes to natural disaster planning, according to the Conference Board and PR Newswire. For my friend Chase Henderson, he helps small and medium-sized companies find money after economic and natural disasters, and he's found up to $10 million to date, thanks to some key mechanisms, including tax credits, business loans, investors, and more. Henderson is the president and co-founder of two companies having to deal with natural disasters or financial freedom, and coming up with a game plan to protect your business longevity and viability after a natural disaster strikes. You can find him in Fort Myers, Florida, running both Blue Water Group and NeuroIs. They also are a huge component of their Economic Recovery Center, which is a one-stop shop for businesses to get the economic support they need for their business to continue to thrive after a disaster has struck. Henderson says is someone with a diverse landscape of experience, which causes him to appreciate the power of business resilience and finding a way forward, and to prepare you once disaster strikes. And he joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Chase, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, and I'm excited to talk to you this afternoon all about small and medium-sized businesses and helping them survive and thrive after natural disasters. Great to see you this afternoon, and happy Florida Wednesday to you, my friend.
Yeah, well, thank you. Appreciate you having me on the show, and a happy Canada Wednesday to you.
Well, I appreciate that, my friend, and I know that your sort of professional heartbeat is to help small and medium-sized businesses find money after and before natural disasters. So I'm wondering if we can start our conversation by you telling me what makes this so fabulous and why you love what you do, my friend.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to talk about it. So, like you said, I have a couple of companies. Main front-facing one that we're describing here is Economic Recovery Center. designed to help small to medium-sized businesses find funds after natural disasters and economic downturns. Now, this business kind of came about a bit of a story here. So I'm in Southwest Florida. So I don't know if you know where Tampa, or if you know where Miami is in Florida, just right across the state. That's where I am. So I'm right on the coast. I'm like right next to a little beach town. And at the end of 2022, in September of 2022, we got hit with a massive hurricane. And I don't know if this is 100% correct, but it was the single largest and most devastating hurricane to hit the state of Florida. One of the most devastating to hit the United States, period. It was called Hurricane Ian, and it came through my little town of Fort Myers, Florida, Pine Island, Sanibel, all these little beach towns, and it destroyed like everything. I mean, if you look up pictures of Fort Myers Beach as an example, you'll see absolute carnage. It looks like a war zone, right? I mean, I don't say that lightly. I have massive respect for individuals who have to go through those scenarios. But if you look at some of these, I mean, buildings were wiped off the map. Homes were floating away in the ocean. There's still buildings now where the walls were just completely blown out and people living in tents running off of generators. This has been almost a year and a half now, still living outside in tents. So it was a really sad sight to see. So myself and a couple of my family friends came together, and we decided to give out food and water and supplies to the communities that have been affected most, right? And luckily for us, we weren't the only ones doing so. The entire community came together. It was such an amazing thing. You would literally see like parade lines in specific neighborhoods with people handing out food and water and supplies to help. Everybody came together to help each other. And it was amazing. FEMA came in, Red Cross came in, tons of government help, awesome stuff. However, throughout that process and a couple months after, we noticed that there was one group of people that wasn't getting the help that they needed. And it wasn't like a specific gender or race or socioeconomic class that wasn't getting the help. It was a specific type of person. And that specific type of person was a business owner. Now, it's not that there aren't resources available for businesses that have been affected by natural disasters. But a lot of times business owners don't really think about that happening to them. They think, oh, this one-off chance that a hurricane comes through or a tornado or an earthquake, that's not going to happen to me, until it does, especially when you live in a coastal town like Fort Myers. So we noticed that a lot of these businesses were starting to close down left and right because they didn't know where to go to get help. So that's where myself and my dad actually were co-founders together on this. We came in with our extensive background in business and our network of investors and lenders and banks and other entities and programs that we're aware of. We came together, put it all under one roof, and decided to go out into our community and help as many businesses as we could. And now that's grown from just this little small town in Fort Myers to all over the United States, with team members in California all the way up to New Jersey. It's grown into something pretty special. We're still a small business ourselves, but we still have made some pretty cool strides over the past almost a year officially. So it's fun stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chase, I want to ask you specifically about the importance of business owners really knowing what financial options are open to them once natural disasters strike, and the importance of financially sort of preparing yourself to do the best you can to absorb what natural disasters bring. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Yeah, well, so it's very important. Obviously, I'm biased because this is what I do for a living, right? But I feel it's very important for businesses to take that time to understand, like, hey, there is a percentage, maybe it's 0.1%, or it could be 90% chance that we are going to be affected by some sort of natural disaster or major economic downturn. You can think of, COVID, right? So if that time is going to occur, we need to know what we're going to do next, right? And the best way to go about that, whether it's looking for ways to recover the business after a disaster or continue the business, or even just trying to find the appropriate financial options to continue, is making sure you have something called a business disaster recovery plan. Now, I call it BDRP for short. And essentially what a BDRP is, and this is something that a lot of business owners can take and start implementing today and start writing it down and creating it right now, is it's essentially a plan that outlines what you're going to do after a storm hits and before a storm hits. So you have two parts of a business disaster recovery plan, BDRP. That is the disaster recovery portion of the plan and a business continuance portion of the plan. Now, when it comes to the actual business operations and the financial aspect of the business, they can both be housed in both sections of the plan. So I'll just describe both parts. You have the disaster recovery part of a BDRP, which is essentially what do you do to bring your business back to normal, right? So is that finding specific vendors to make up for any vendors you might have lost due to a natural disaster or economic downturn? Is that finding the correct contractors to come in and rebuild the building that you may have lost after a storm? Or is it finding the right funding, such as an economic injury and disaster loan, an EIDL loan here in the States, to be able to get yourself back up on your feet financially so that you can actually continue your business? So that's the disaster recovery part. And then there's the second part, which is the business continuity part of the plan. Business continuity is saying is like, okay, so we just got wrecked by something, right? Disaster or economic downturn, or whatever. How do we continue to do business right now, right? Because the disaster recovery part is trying to get yourself back to normal. What do we do in the meantime? So like an example of this could be like maybe a restaurant, right? So maybe a restaurant down in Fort Myers Beach got, maybe the building got just obliterated, right? Maybe one side's blown out. A lot of their equipment was washed away, some of their tables and chairs. What do you do in that instant? Okay, so one of the first things you should possibly look into is looking into, like I had mentioned earlier, the EIDL loan, economic injury and disaster loan, to try to find some money to be able to rebuild and get back to normal, like I mentioned before. But in the meantime, we also need to maybe find some foldable tables and chairs and some basic equipment we maybe have in storage, or we can go like on Facebook Marketplace and buy some extra equipment so we can continue to serve our customers throughout this recovery period. Right. So that's just an example off the top of my head as far as what a business can utilize a BDRP for. But when it comes to, the business operations and the financial aspects of a business after a storm, it's very, very important you have some sort of plan in place, even if it's just like a 1% chance it might happen. It's better to be safe than sorry. So I highly recommend you go through and make a plan of that sort.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before I ask you about your own personal business journey, my friend, and because I know it's been diversified for you
Yeah.
specifically, but I wanted to know about dealing with the emotional side of helping these business owners, because a lot of the times people put their life savings in their businesses, and once they're destroyed by natural disasters, it's important to manage the emotional side of this, as well as the financial side. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. And there, I mean, like you said, there definitely is a very emotional part to this, especially when you're dealing with small businesses, right? Because a lot of these small businesses are mom and pop shops. Maybe they have a team of up to 50 people on it, possibly, but it could just be, mom, dad, son, and wife, who knows? So especially when you have instances like that, there is a lot of emotion in that. So as an example, one of our clients right now, we're helping them go through the process of getting an EIDL loan and finding additional funding so they can expand and recover after Hurricane Ian. There was a second hurricane that came through last year that also affected them, called Hurricane Adalia. So they got hit by two hurricanes, and COVID obviously knocked them on their feet. So, I mean, they are just in this point where, they're doing fine. The business is running, they're making money, but it's just the emotional and mental toll of going through back to back to back instances of major setbacks in their business. It's really gotten to them, to the point of almost tears, right? No tears on calls yet, but it was, last call I had with them, it was almost tears. And it makes you really realize just how important this kind of work is, because it's not just about finding money and making sure the business runs. It's about making sure that their livelihood continues and making sure these individuals, these companies, these businesses can continue to put food on their tables for themselves and their family. So this kind of work has really shown me just the compassionate side of business that can exist, that many people may not think is there in the business world, but there really is a compassionate side if you're looking for it. And if you want to find it, it's definitely in the disaster recovery space. So there definitely is the emotional and mental aspect to consider when you're working with clients in the sector.
Yeah, it's also important to tell them that there are practical steps you can take to protect yourself, right?
Absolutely. There's usually always some sort of answer because there's been hurricanes, there has been economic downturns. COVID was a special exception. Last time that really happened, especially in the U.S. was what early like 1910s or 20s or something like that. So it's been a while. And a lot of people from then probably aren't alive right now. So you do have some new instances, but a lot of these instances have happened before, and there are answers to these obstacles. So it is, understanding that this is an emotional process, but also understanding that there is a practical approach, as you said, to solving this problem, and it's just a matter of walking through the steps to rectify the situation.
Yeah, and Chris, I'm curious to ask you about your own sort of entrepreneurial journey because you say you have a special understanding and appreciation for business resilience, my friend. So tell me about your diversified business journey, my friend.
Absolutely. So I have entrepreneurial blood. So my dad, to give a background, my dad is the former CEO and founder of a company called FindWhat.com. It was essentially Google before Google became huge, and it was a Nasdaq publicly traded company. He was all over he had offices all over the world. Had done business with some of the largest holding companies and institutions around the world. So I have entrepreneurial blood, to say it briefly. But and so with that, when I came to an early age of about 20 to 22, I decided to start to dip my toes into the entrepreneurial world. And essentially, business can be defined or refined down to a simple statement of ask the marketplace for what it wants and give it to them. That's essentially what business is. You're finding the problems, you're giving the solutions. It's very easy to say that. It's very hard to do, especially in all sorts of sectors. So I started off initially in the CBD and e-commerce space. I had a brand called CBD Strong. It was about how the benefits of utilizing CBD when it came to fitness recovery, because I was big into working out and fitness at that time. But I didn't know what it really took to build a business, so that failed pretty quick. The next thing that came up was my love of fitness, so I got into the fitness space. I was also in social media marketing. I have been in real estate. I've been all over the place. Fitness mainly the majority of the time. And through all of that, I've experienced a lot of highs and a lot of lows. And what you realize as an entrepreneur, something I didn't want to realize, but I had to come to reality, is that there's always going to be something, right? So it's not a matter of avoiding pain or avoiding downturns or it's avoiding just the bad. It's a matter of how do you encounter less of it, but if you do encounter it, how do you get over it quickly, right? So that's really been the main part, and that's a lot of what I would teach clients within the fitness space, right? Teaching clients like how to overcome the mental obstacles and the physical obstacles to get to their goals. Now doing so with the disaster recovery, because you're going to experience a lot of these problems, but it's not a matter of trying to avoid them. It's a matter of how do you get over them quickly. That's something I've definitely experienced over the various industries that I've been a part of over the past 5 to 7 years. If that
Yeah,
answers your question.
yeah, absolutely. And I know it's a family dynamic for you, as you mentioned. You're in business with your dad. You've also founded Neuro and Blue Water Group, my friend. So tell me briefly about those companies and where you think your desire for business diversification comes from, my friend.
Absolutely. So my desire to business diversification is that I can't sit still and I need to be doing things.
Me too.
uh, so you understand. But yeah, so Neuro and Blue Water. So I'll kind of give you the organizational structure here. So Neuro is the parent company, essentially the holding company, and then Economic Recovery Center and Blue Water are sister companies underneath Neuro. They're both fictional aliases, so DBAs, doing business as. So Neuro acts essentially as the parent company, as the data company, the holding company. It doesn't really do a whole lot. Blue Water, on the other hand, came about as a response to requests from Economic Recovery Center. So in helping our clients find funds through different programs and individuals to help these businesses get back on their feet, they wanted more, right? They wanted more funding. They wanted more avenues. They wanted more introductions to possible investors or other banks and lenders, the SBA. And so we're like, all right, well, there's a pretty good demand. It's pretty consistent that when these clients come to us, they want more. So okay, let's build out Blue Water as the additional, right? So economic recovery center is essentially helping these companies get back to normal. Blue Water is helping them grow above and beyond from there. And so with Blue Water, that's where we connect these clients with banks and lenders and investors to inject cash so they can ultimately do what they need to do to grow and scale. So that's kind of the high level synopsis of those other two entities I know you've mentioned here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chase, I don't. If you don't mind, I'm going to ask a bit of a selfish question next. So,
Absolutely.
As you know from reading up on it, but I was born with cerebral palsy, and outside of hosting this podcast, my friend, I help organizations really amplify their hiring of folks with disabilities because, for myself and people who look like me, it's not always easy to find and locate and maintain work. So outside of hosting this podcast, I do some public speaking on the importance of hiring folks with disabilities, and I help organizations create a more inclusive culture. So, having said all that, I think entrepreneurship is a great way for folks with disabilities to create an individual and professional identity. And I'm curious as a millennial entrepreneur yourself, what do you think are the benefits people with disabilities can offer the business world?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is this is kind of one of my philosophies on just about anything is that hopefully that these businesses and individuals are evaluating incoming hires or other entrepreneurs on the basis of ability, right? The ability to do the job in front of you, right? So it's not a matter of like disability, like cerebral palsy or deaf of hard of hearing. It's a matter of, do they have the drive? Do they have the work ethic and can they get the job done? Just as good, if not better than the average person, right? So as an example, my dad's actually on the board of a local nonprofit here called the Deaf of Hard of Hearing Center. So working with hard of hearing individuals, and it's amazing what kind of markets are untapped in the deaf of hard of hearing, possibly cerebral palsy and physical disabilities. Like there's still so much potential to be had, and so much what's the word? So much potential to be had.
Yeah, I was going to say intellectual capital, right? Because it creates a competitive advantage, doesn't it?
I 100% agree with you. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chase, what do you think it means to have financial flexibility as a business owner or an entrepreneur?
Financial flexibility. Okay, yeah, this is one of the things. When it comes to business or financial flexibility, the biggest thing is just being adaptable, right? So it's a matter of looking at the landscape and understanding that there isn't just one way of doing business. There isn't just one way of finding funds and financing your business. There are multiple ways to go about the process, whether that's looking through the SBA in the United States for finding, small business loans through them, going through, possibly another individual lender for hard money. There's investors that can come in and inject cash, or you can sell equity in your company so they can come on board and help you out. Like, there's just so many different ways to go about growing a company outside of just sales. And the financial flexibility aspect is more so just having that mindset and that understanding that there is more than one way. It doesn't have to be, rigid, like, oh, this is what I learned in a textbook, so it has to be done this way. No, everything can be done 1,000 different ways. There's no one right way. Oh, well, as long as you're following the law, there is no one right way of getting to the desired end goal that you're looking to achieve. So that financial flexibility really comes down to more so a mindset of understanding that there are other possibilities out there for you.
Yeah, and just a question out of personal interest and curiosity, my friend. I'm wondering your thoughts on how you think millennial business owners have really sort of reshaped the way we think about entrepreneurship.
I think the biggest part, and it's something that actually my dad and I talk about a lot, is the quick adoption of technology, especially new and emerging technology. And you look in the AI space and how much you can do with AI. So, like an example, I filmed a 20-minute long video and I threw it into an AI video editor and it spit out 10 short form videos for me in about 20 minutes. Whereas you look into maybe Generation X or baby boomers, they might go through a process of hiring a production studio, then they might hire an editor, and then they might go through like a creative, like I don't know, like some crazy long process, and then you ultimately get these short videos over the period of maybe a month or 2 months. Whereas I just got mine in 20 minutes. But it's all a matter of just being willing to adapt and implement just the newest technology on the bleeding edge to be able to grow and scale even quicker. So I think that is one thing that millennials and Gen Z as well now entering the marketplace. Millennials and Gen Z do very, very well is that acceptance of adapting with the times when it comes to technology. That's a huge, huge advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. And Trish, considering where you live in Florida, my friend, I'm curious, what would be your message to business owners about protecting themselves, particularly in the Florida region, when disaster strikes, my friend? Because you go through hurricane season every year in Florida. So, what are some practical steps, both financial and otherwise, you think that Florida business owners specifically need to take to protect their businesses?
Absolutely. So the first one, and it's just kind of something a lot of Floridians know, especially when they live along the coast with all of these hurricanes, is have a generator or two, right? Because it's not fun not having power, especially when we live in a world that's so dependent on electricity and power. So having a generator is definitely a must for any business, for any homeowner, any individual in Florida. The second thing is definitely make sure you have good insurance, good flood insurance, flood insurance, especially with Hurricane Ian, when it came through, we don't really get storm surge here. I've been through a lot of hurricanes in Southwest Florida. I've played outside in hurricanes as a kid. Like it's just something that we never really ever take serious because it's never really done any crazy damage. We've had a category 5 hurricane through here before. Back in the early 2000s, it was I think it was early 2000s, Hurricane Charlie. And it ripped an island in half, but there was nobody living in that part of the island, so it didn't hurt anybody. And the rest of the county was pretty much back on its feet in about a week. So the guy, category 5, that's whatever, it's fine. But then Hurricane Ian came through, and we had 16, if I remember correctly, 16-foot storm surge. So all of our beach towns were underwater, all of them. You had 2-story houses that were completely underwater. And so that's something that a lot of individuals didn't think about. They like, oh, flood insurance is kind of, yeah, maybe I should get it, maybe I should, yeah, whatever. Some homes, some areas required you to have flood insurance, but a lot of areas where it's optional, it's like, no, I'm good. So definitely having flood insurance is very, very important because a lot of these homes that didn't have it, I mean, they're kind of SOL because they didn't have insurance to cover from flood. It's like, oh, we have maybe insurance to cover for hurricane. Well, you don't have insurance for a flood. So tough. So those are two big things I would definitely recommend. And then the BDRP that I mentioned earlier, the Business Disaster Recovery Plan, definitely very, very important to have one of those in place beforehand so you know what to do before, during, and after a natural disaster hits the state of Florida.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, Chase, for you specifically, one of your major goals is to help people achieve greatness and inspire change in business, my friend. So what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I had to. Yeah, it's related to a question that I ask business owners, yeah, or that my dad might ask business owners, and that is, how do you define success? So that's essentially how we define success, is being able to inspire greatness in others. But then I had to think about it with your question. You addressed it, and I was like, oh, well, now I have to define my definition. Cool. Okay, so I wrote it out, and I'm gonna pull it up real quick to make sure I do get across exactly what I wanted to get across.
Yeah, as an old
Yeah.
journalist, my friend, I can respect your preparation, so I appreciate that.
Oh, I wrote out entire answers to every question you sent me, and I know I already didn't answer one of the questions the way I wanted to, but that's okay. Uh, but yeah, so with this one, inspiring change, or inspiring greatness, right? So like achieving greatness can mean so many different things to so many different people, like achievements or excellence or influence. But for me, I think it really revolves around, what kind of impact do you want to have on those that you come in contact with, directly or indirectly, right? So either face to face or over creation of content. So, and the way you can really measure that is how do people feel after they've worked with you or they've spoken with you, they've interacted with you? Do they feel like their life's improved? Do they feel inspired to take more action? Do they feel like they're capable, or is it the inverse? I mean, do they feel cheated? Do they feel defeated? Do they feel like they're not worthy? Because yeah, I've heard this so many times on social media, and I've seen it happen a lot too, is that people won't always remember what you do for them, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And that's real impact. So it's having that emotional and mental effect that you have on someone's life. So, in order to achieve greatness, I really define that as being able to have that emotional and mental impact on an individual after I've come in contact with them and I've provided so much value that maybe they won't remember what I did for them, but they'll at least remember how I made them feel, and it inspired them to actually go take more action in their lives to take where their life is at right now and make it just a degree better. So that's greatness for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before I ask you about your podcast, my friend, I'm also curious to go back to our conversation about diversity and inclusion. How do you think we should define the new definition of diversity and inclusion? So, how do you define business diversity with an inclusive lens, my friend?
That's a great question. I'll be honest, I haven't really thought about these questions too in depth, and I'm very glad that you're bringing them to my attention now. So when it comes to diversity and inclusiveness, I think the best way to promote, honestly, I think the best way to promote that is through kind of like a meritocracy model, right? So really, kind of what I was mentioning before, having people come in and show what they're capable of, and really being able to, show what they're capable of, because it doesn't matter what background you come from. There are so many capable people in so many different arenas and so many different groups that just aren't given the chance because of the fact they're in a specific group. And lack of better words, that sucks. That really sucks. So there's an amazing people in every single group all around the world. So I think the best way to go about diversity and inclusivity is being able to have that kind of meritocracy model and being able to evaluate somebody on their ability to actually do the job, not necessarily, what their resume says. Well, it does, that could definitely help. Being able to evaluate somebody based off of, can they get the job done in a way that best aligns with the company, but also best serves the individual, the customer, the employee that's coming in, or the business owner, right? If you are the business owner. So I think that meritocracy model is probably the best way to go about it, without having done, honestly, too much research myself into diversity and inclusivity.
Yeah, and I'm going to just follow up with this. One of the things I worked hard at doing is trying to change the mind of the people that are in charge of sort of acquiring the talent, the people in charge of hiring and making those decisions. And, Chase, one of the analogies that I will share with you that I personally use when I give public presentations is thinking of it as a dining room table, right? And pulling out a chair of inclusion, or thinking about it as you're going to Thanksgiving dinner every day, and sort of pulling out a chair of inclusion because everyone around the dining room or Thanksgiving table is thankful for something, and if you include them, then your perspective is more broad. So what do you think, from your perspective, it's going to take to change the mind of these talent acquisition professionals and those in power and leadership, my friend?
Well, you're the expert. I think it's the showing of more results, and showing, because the mindset may come, again, you're the expert, so you're going to know better than I will, but this is just kind of off the top of my head. The mindset may come from an assumption of results, an assumption of what this type of individual may bring to the table and have to show for it. Whereas if you can show someone the results of something, maybe like a blind showcase, right? So it's like you're showing the results of, like, hey, employee A did this, employee B did this, employee C did this. guess which one is the individual of disability, and then maybe something like that. Kind of like with they had the soda tasting experiment. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but it was like they had a soda tasting, but they had like Coke, Pepsi, and generic. And across the board, people enjoyed the generic more than they did the name brands. But it was because of the fact that something is labeled generic, you think it's not as good. But that's not the case. It was better than all of them. So I think maybe going about that process could be a good way, and being able to showcase that at scale through like maybe content could be very beneficial. But beyond that, I would love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Well, I think it's continuing to educate people with the information that will help them make an informed decision, because you can tell business owners that hiring folks with disabilities is a great moral thing to do. But I also think it's important to show them the what I call sort of financial and production receipts, because when you hire folks with disabilities, you can retain them at a 72% higher clip than their non-disabled counterparts, and they show up to work 86% of the time. So there are benefits to hiring folks with disabilities, and for your world, for small and medium-sized businesses to hire folks with disabilities, consumers that know that, studies in Canada have shown that 92% of consumers support businesses who hire folks with disabilities. So I think it's educating them on the benefits and showing them how it improves their bottom line, and also their morale practices at work. And because when you increase morale, people want to show up to work, and that's always a good thing, isn't it?
That's a fantastic thing. That's definitely something to address too. Is like just getting people that want to show up to work. That's a huge thing, especially in a culture of working from home. Right? Everybody wants to work from home, but being able to find somebody that really wants to come in and get work done with the team in office, that's crazy, but it's much rarer to find these days. So that's a fantastic point that you made there.
Well, thanks for that, and thank you for turning the tables and interviewing the interviewer. But that's fine.
I'm not the expert in that arena. So one thing I have learned is that one thing that I would knowledge I've been imparted on is that the best experience in the world is someone else's. Right? There's always, you can learn something from everybody in every facet of life. So if there's an expert out there that knows something, you're the expert. I'm the student. I want to listen. I want to learn.
Well, the philosophy I take on that, Chase, is no matter how many degrees you have on the wall or how many years you went to school, you can always learn something new and impactful from somebody else, right?
Absolutely. We're in total agreement.
Chase, I want to talk about your podcast that you hosted for a while, buddy, called Healthy and Wealthy, my friend, which allows you to have these financial conversations and increase your knowledge base as well. So tell me all about the show and what you got out of hosting it, my friend.
Oh, yeah. So I had a show that I hosted on and off for about 4 years called the Young, Healthy, and Wealthy podcast. It's something I wish I could still do, but it's a matter of time. I can't find the time to sit down, and I would do episodes for an hour, 2 hours. Longest episode I ever did was 2.5 hours. And I love the process of interviewing somebody and getting to know what's going on in their head, how they operate, why they do things the way they do. But I do something kind of similar called a Threadcast now. So it's just a little kind of carousel slide thing I do on Threads, the new social media platform. So I'm keeping it alive. But as far as the podcast itself, it was so incredibly beneficial in so many ways. One of the main ones being the network that you get out of doing a podcast. So anybody who's listening, if it makes sense for your business model, or if you have that labor of love or labor and insanity mindset that we share here, definitely pursue a podcast because of the networking capabilities. Because one, it gets you into rooms and conversations that you may not have otherwise been able to be a part of had you not had that podcast. Because essentially what you're doing is you're giving a platform to somebody else to where you were distributing celebrity. right? It's giving that person a moment to shine, and it gives them the ability to be heard, because one of the most common human desires that we all have is that we want to be heard. We don't want to be ignored. We don't want our voice to be silenced. We want to know that people are listening to us. That's a huge human innate desire. So by doing a podcast and interviewing somebody, you're giving them that opportunity to do so. And in doing that, you are developing immense rapport with the individual on the other side of the screen, or on the other side of the table. Because now they feel like they've been heard and they respect you, and they may not remember what has been said in the podcast, but kind of what I was saying before, they remember how it made them feel to be on that show and to be showcased in that way. So in doing that, I was able to meet a lot of amazing individuals all over the world. I met a massive motivational keynote speaker over in Australia. I had met the CEO of the founder. I'm sorry, the founder of FanDuel, one of the sports betting apps here in the United States. The CEO of Capriati's, a major sandwich chain here with, I think it was like 100 something locations, tons of very prominent real estate experts and individuals. I even got asked to speak at an event in Puerto Rico because of the fact the person I had interviewed who was running the event loved their interview so much, like, oh yeah, you got to come down to Puerto Rico and come attend this event. You can interview all the different speakers here. And then they threw me up on stage too, as a nice little bonus. So there's a lot of opportunity that can come out of having a podcast, because of the fact that you are giving somebody that stage to be heard and acquire that sort of celebrity for however long that period is. And that can lead to a lot of very beneficial things in your personal life as well as your business life.
Yeah, absolutely. And talking about a business life, I'm curious to ask you about what sort of mindset do you think entrepreneurs have to have if they want to have sustainable success?
I love this question. So it's in order for the mindset an entrepreneur needs to have in order to achieve success is kind of this balancing act of two opposing things that sound like they're opposing, but they work really well together. One is a delusional sense of self-belief. You have to believe above all else that you are going to succeed and nothing's going to stop you in order to do that. Like, there's nothing that can get in your way. But on the same token, you do need to have a hyper-realist viewpoint of how life works. So you need to understand, like, okay, yes, I believe that I can achieve and I can do all these things, but like, here's how life actually works, and things aren't going to go the way that I think they're going to go all the time. But that's okay, because now that I understand that this, and this can happen, I can come up with a plan in order to overcome those obstacles to reinforce that self-delusional belief in my head that I will succeed. So you need to have that kind of balance between the two seemingly opposing views in order to achieve that level of success. And if you look at any of these individuals who kind of achieve that, one of the individuals in question that I've really adopted this from has been Ray Dalio. I've been reading his book, Principles, and the self-delusional belief that's always been there for me. And I've always had an idea of what that second part was, but I couldn't quite pinpoint it. And he highlighted it perfectly in his book, that hyper-realistic point of view, right? So it's not looking through the world in rose-colored glasses. It's looking at the world through actual glasses. And here's how the world works. Here are all the facts. How can I use these to my advantage so that I can support the self-delusional belief in my head that I can succeed? So it's having that balancing act between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And Chase, I know you've got plenty of experience in this, and so sometimes it works for others and sometimes it doesn't. So tell me, what are the benefits and drawbacks of working with immediate and close family, my friend? And how do you think you can have a successful family and business dynamic if you work together?
I love the question. So it's definitely an interesting one for sure, because if you go into the workplace and you have coworkers, there's likely not going to be emotional connections between each other. So, if there's disagreements at work, or that you might have animosity towards, one another, it's gone at 5 o'clock, right? Because you're home, you're away, you're in your own world with your family doing whatever you're doing. When you're working with family, that never goes away. That's there 24/7. So if there is any bad blood, if there is any animosity, if there is anything negative happening in the business, that will bleed over into the family life, and that could cause some hostility. So I think an important thing to address in order to avoid that the best you can is, when you're going into an agreement or going to business with a family member, having that conversation ahead of time, that hyper-realistic view, because you kind of have the rose petal glasses of thinking, oh, we're family, everything's going to be hunky-dory. No, business isn't always great. So there's going to be tough conversations and there's going to be disagreements. So one of the things you need to do beforehand is having that conversation with said family members and going like, hey, things aren't always going to be great. So what are we going to do in the instances where things aren't great? We can't just disagree with each other, go home and then be just angry at each other all the time, or go to these, maybe Thanksgiving or Christmas or Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate, or however your family comes together. We can't have this sort of disagreement and hostility bleed over into there. So you need to have that conversation ahead of time to mitigate and figure out a plan to get rid of that. Now that's the negative side. Now the positive side is, because you're family, you have a pretty good idea on how each of you thinks, right? So when you go into a situation and you're having to make a decision, you're able to make decisions pretty fast because you understand how this person's going to think. Oh, okay, so if I do this, they're going to do this, and boom, I'm good. So I'm going to go ahead and make this decision. We're going to move forward. A lot of times you will find a lot of agreements, especially if it's family members that you do relate well with in your personal life. There's a chance that you might relate well in your business life. So there is a lot of synergy that could be had as well. So examples like my dad and I, we think the exact same way about pretty much everything. So it's very easy for one of us to make a decision knowing that we do have the full support of the other individual, because we know it's the same decision that they would have made if they were in our shoes. So being able to have family members and family dynamics where there is that agreeableness and there is that sense of sameness in mind and thought is very helpful when it comes to business, because it reduces the amount of lag and the amount of latency between input coming into the business and a decision being made on that input. So there's definitely pros and cons, but I definitely think the pros outweigh the cons as long as you can mitigate the cons.
Oh, well, yeah, and you have a defined game plan going in before you start a business, right?
Yep, business plan is key.
Absolutely. And Trace, in the interest of not keeping you here forever, I'm going to combine my last two questions because
Okay.
they're interconnected, my friend. I'm curious to ask you about how you think you've grown the most as a person and as a business leader in the last 5 to 10 years. And when we apply that to your personal and professional legacy, how do you want that to be defined?
So I think I've definitely grown in the capacity of resilience. Kind of like one of the things that we do with the Economic Recovery Center, helping companies become more resilient. I've become much more resilient when it comes to tough times, encountering tough times, right? Because when you first get into business, there is a little bit of naivety, a little bit of rose-colored glasses when you start, and I definitely had that when I started. So whenever anything bad happened, I would, this is the fight, flight, or freeze thing. I'd freeze or I'd flight and like, oh, what's going on? I don't know why this bad thing happened. Like this shouldn't have happened. And then, I'd falter. Whereas now, if something bad happens, like, okay, cool, right? What do we do next? It's this idea of soldiering on that Warren Buffett puts. It was one of his last interviews that I saw this, and you are allowed to cry, you're allowed to be mad, you're allowed to shout, you're allowed to do all of these things and have all of these negative emotions, feel the feelings, do the thing, but you have to soldier on. You have to move through the pain. You have to move forward. You have to wake up in the morning. You have to go to bed at night and do it all over again until you can overcome the obstacle at hand. In the beginning, I definitely wasn't wired that way because I just hadn't experienced enough. I hadn't been kicked around in the beginning, but now I have been kicked around. A couple of things have happened. Some big things have happened over the years where I've been able to overcome it. I'm here. I'm alive. I'm well. And one thing that's helped me do that and helped me to soldier on is a quote from a family friend, which is, "They can't eat you." Right. So no matter how bad a scenario gets, like whoever, maybe you owe somebody money or you have to fire somebody or fill in the blank, whatever, they can't eat you. You're safe. Physically, you are safe. You will survive actual physical survival. So it's all good. Yeah, mentally and emotionally, it might suck for a while, but ultimately, you're going to be able to wake up in the morning tomorrow. And that's the biggest blessing you could possibly have. So soldier on, they can't eat you. Those are two huge things that have led to the development of resilience for me and being able to encounter a lot of just very negative situations and scenarios with tact and be able to overcome them.
Yeah, and how do you want that to apply to your legacy, my friend? How do you want your legacy to be defined?
So I love that question because it's something we talk about a lot over here is that legacy. And one of the things I want to be able to do, and the reason why that resilience is so important is because I'm going to be able to overcome. There's still higher levels of resilience to reach. It's not like I'm some resilience guru and I've overcome it, so I'm good to go forever. No, there's going to be bigger challenges as we grow. And it's going to be testing me further and further. But the more I'm tested and the more I'm able to overcome obstacles and challenges, the more I'm going to be able to give out into the world. And ultimately, my legacy, I want it to be one where I was able to put out more than I took. Right, because I want to live the high life. I want to have the nice things and live the cool lifestyle. I want to do all those things. It's flashy, it's fun, it's cool. But you don't get that unless you actually provide value. And it's not. And so there is that level. There's a transactional level, which puts you even. Like, okay, I put out X amount of value, I get X amount of return. I am now net zero. And it's not net positive, not net negative. I'm net zero because I got what I wanted. So now how do you go from there to being able to put out more than what you took? And that's just being able to give out, coming on podcasts like this or putting out more content on YouTube or Instagram, whatever it is, like just content is like a start, or being able to give out free resources, or being able to help companies like we are, like I had mentioned earlier, the specific company hit by 2 hurricanes and COVID and almost coming to tears on the call. Being able to help them isn't just a matter of like, okay, I did my job. It's a matter of, hey, I let that family business continue so maybe they can pass it on to their kids and then their kids and then their kids, because I was able to come in and help where I could. Not to say that will happen. I don't know. You never know what's going to happen, 30, 40, 50, 100 years down the line. But the fact that I'm able to go in these different scenarios and be able to affect change over generations, that's what's most important to me, whether it's somebody else's family or my own family. Being able to have, my great grandson, or let's just say great grandson, because the likelihood that a lot of us will remember our great grandparents is pretty low. So great grandson or great granddaughter or great grandkids, we'll be able to look back and say that they were proud to be related to me, and be inspired by that. That's huge for me too, because that means I've put out more than I've took in, because I don't get anything for that. I'm dead. I'm most likely dead at that point. So being able to inspire another generation like that beyond me, beyond this time right now, is huge for that legacy. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, absolutely. Cherish in the spirit of sharing, my friend. The last line of my biography says that the biggest smiles I get in life are not through personal achievement, but through the smiles and thrills I'm able to give to other people, because life is about paying it forward, isn't it?
I love that. That's a great quote.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for that. I came up with that all by myself, so thanks for that.
I love it.
And
I'm gonna be taking that.
Well, you can take it. Just give me 30% of your commission, okay? I'm only kidding, but Chase, finally tell me, if people want to get connected with you, my friend, what's the best way they can do that?
So the best way you can connect with me is either through Instagram, Threads, or LinkedIn, which is where you found me. So on LinkedIn, I'm Chase Adler, Pisaris Henderson. On Instagram and Threads, I am Chase AP Henderson. Those are the 3 places where I am active the most, where you're able to get in contact with me, send me a DM, interact with my content, throw me a question. Always here to help.
Well, I threw you a podcasting interview, so I appreciate that.
I love it. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, my friend. And all kidding aside, my friend, and I want to thank you for the inroads of difference that you're making in the field of entrepreneurship, and for hanging out with me this afternoon to talk about disaster relief in business and prosperity as well. Your work in the space and time on my behalf, my friend, is most appreciated, and I want to thank you for being here this afternoon.
Well, thank you for giving me the stage and distributing celebrity over to me. I appreciate it. It's been an absolute pleasure to be able to speak about what we do, but more so to be able to speak with you, man. This is a really, really cool podcast that you've got, and you've definitely got a very specific aura, I guess is the best way to put it to you, where you've just got this down. You know what you're doing, you know how to do it, and you do it very well. So I've had an absolute blast. Thank you for having me on.